chapters. So this video is going to contain visitations, the attraction called Charming but Deadly, and then also the chapter called Precognition. Okay, so first one's called Visitations. Celia Bowen sits at a desk surrounded by piles of books. She ran out of space for her library some time ago, but instead of making the room larger, she has opted to let the books become the room. Piles of them function as tables, others hang suspended from the ceiling, along with large golden cages holding several live white doves. Another round cage, sitting on a table rather than hanging from above, contains an elaborate clock. It marks both time and astrological movements as it ticks steadily through the afternoon. A large black raven sleeps, uncaged, alongside the complete works of Shakespeare. Mismatched candles and silver candelabras burning in sets of 3 surround the desk in the center of the room. Upon the desk itself, there's a slowly cooling cup of tea, a scarf that has been partially unraveled into a ball of crimson yarn, a framed photograph of a deceased clockmaker, a solitary playing card long separated from its deck, and an open book filled with signs and symbols and signatures procured from other pieces of paper. Okay, we can recognize a lot of this stuff. Okay, first of all, whose red scarf? Do you think that she is partially unwoven? And that is going to be her Theuson's. Same thing with the photograph of him. Okay, a solitary playing card. We know that Marco just left the 2 of hearts on the chair in her tent. And so we can assume that that is what that card is. And then we also see bits and pieces of Marco's notebook. And she also has all kinds of like random things hanging all through the room. She's got books like crazy. Okay, so more or less, Celia is working as hard as she can to try to make the circus independent. Celia sits with a notebook and pen, attempting to decipher the system the book is written in. She tries to think the way she imagines Marco might have as he wrote it, picturing him inscribing each page, rendering the delicate ink branches of the tree that winds throughout the book. She reads each signature over and over, checking how securely each lock of hair is pasted, scrutinizing each symbol. She has spent so much time repeating the process that she could recreate the book from memory, but she still does not fully comprehend how the system works. The raven stirs and caws at something in the shadows. "You're bothering Hugin," Celia says, without looking up. The candlelight catches only the edges of her father's form as he hovers nearby, highlighting the creases of his jacket, the collar of his shirt, glinting in the hollows of his dark eyes. "You should really get another one," he says, peering at the agitated raven. "A Munin to complete the set." "I prefer thought to memory, Papa," Celia says. Is the only response. Celia ignores him as he leans over her shoulder, watching her flip through the inscribed pages. "This is a god-awful mess," he says. "A language you cannot speak yourself is not necessarily a god-awful mess," Celia says, transcribing a line of symbols into her notebook. "This is messy work, bindings and charms," Hector says, floating to the other side of the desk to get a better look. "Very much Alexander style, overly complicated and covert." Okay, so Hector, we know that he shows up whether Celia wants him there or not, and he's here right now. He's watching her try to mimic Marco's work, and he says that it's just a mess. Like, they'll never get anything out of that. What a mess. And she says, "Just because you don't understand it doesn't make it a mess, Dad." "Yet, with enough study, anyone could do it. Quite the contrast to all your lectures about how I was special." "You are special. You're beyond this." before his response is heavy. I thought it preferable to the life you might have had otherwise, regardless of the consequences. Marco closes and locks the door. The man in the gray suit lifts his hand to knock again, but then lowers it and walks away instead. Okay, so all the book, like every time we hear that Alexander doesn't even really talk to Marco, he never visits him, all of that stuff has a lot to do with what Hector said about Alexander becoming too attached to his contestants. So he was trying really hard not to get attached to Marco, but obviously he is attached now. And Marco says, "Why did you do this to me? Like, why did you pull me from that orphanage and put me into this challenge?" And Alexander honestly says, "I really thought it was better than the life you were living in that orphanage, you know?" So it's like every little glimmer of Alexander that we get, we see more and more of what a kind-hearted person he actually is. Like finding out that what he had said to Celia was that she was an angel, talking to Hector about how can you wager your own daughter in this fight. You know, Alexander actually has a heart and actually does care about them. All right, this next little part is called Charming but Deadly. And this tent would be a big no for me. I would not go in this tent, but let's listen. Charming but deadly. You follow the sound of a flute into a hidden corner, the hypnotic melody beckoning you closer. Seated on the ground, nestled in an alcove on striped pillows, are two women. One plays the flute you heard. A burning coil of incense sits between them, along with a large black-lidded basket. A small audience is gathering. The other woman carefully removes the lid from the basket before taking out a flute of her own and adding a counter melody to the first. Two white cobras coil around each other as they rise from the woven basket in perfect time with the music. For a moment, they seem to be one snake and not two, and then they separate again, moving down along the sides of the basket, gliding onto the ground quite close to your feet. The snakes move back and forth together in motions resembling a strikingly formal dance, elegant and graceful. The music increases in tempo, and now there is something harsher about the way the snakes move. Waltz morphs into battle. They circle each other, and you watch for one or the other to strike. One of them hisses softly, and the other responds in kind. They continue to circle as the music and the incense rise into the starry sky above. You cannot tell which snake strikes first. They are identical after all. As they rear and hiss and jump at each other, you are distracted by the fact that they are both no longer stark white, but a perfect ebony black. And like I said, that is a no for me, people. Okay, so I don't know if I ever showed this to you. This is the pillow that is on my bed, and it says, just one more chapter. Guess what? Last chapter for this week's reading. Okay, here we go. Precognition. Okay, so this is, oh man, this is the night before all the craziness is going to happen at the circus. Most of the train's passengers have settled into their respective cars and compartments to read or sleep or otherwise pass the journey. Corridors that were bustling with people at departure time are now clearly empty as Poppet and Widget make their way from car to car, quiet as cats. Tags hang by each compartment door, marked with handwritten names. They stop at the one that reads C. Bowen, and Widget lifts his hand to knock softly on the frosted glass. "Come in," calls a voice from inside, and Poppet slides the door open. Okay, so Poppet and Widget are going to see Celia right now. "Are we interrupting anything?" she asks. "No," Celia says. "Do come in." She closes the symbol-filled book she has been reading and places it on a table. The entire compartment looks like an explosion in a library. Piles of books and paper amongst the velvet-covered benches and polished wood tables. The light dances around the room with the motion of the train, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers. Widget slides the door closed behind them and latches it. Would you like some tea? Celia asks. No, thank you, Poppet says. She looks nervously at Widget, who only nods. Celia watches both of them, Poppet biting her lip and refusing to meet Celia's eyes, while Widget leans against the door. Out with it, she says. Poppet starts. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Celia asks, moving piles of books so they can sit on the violet benches, but the twins both remain where they are. I think something that was supposed to happen didn't happen, Poppet says. And what might that be? Celia asks. Our friend Bailey was supposed to come with us. Ah, yes. Widget mentioned something about that, Celia says. I take it he did not? No, Poppet says. We waited for him, but he didn't come. But I don't know if that's because he didn't want to or because we left early. I see, Celia says. It seems a very big decision to me, deciding whether or not to run away and join the circus. Perhaps he did not have enough time to properly consider it. But he was supposed to come, Poppet says. I know he was supposed to come. Did you see something? Celia asks. Sort of. How does one sort of see something? It's not as clear as it was before, Poppet says. I can't see anything as clearly as I used to. It's all bits and pieces that don't make sense. Nothing here has made any sense for a year, and you know it. I think that is an exaggeration, but I understand how it can seem that way, Celia says. It is not an exaggeration, Poppet says, raising her voice. The chandeliers begin to shudder, and Celia closes her eyes, taking a deep breath and waiting for them to return to a gentle sway before she speaks. Poppet, there is no one here who is more upset by what happened last year than I am. And I have told you before, it is not your fault, and there is nothing that you could have done to prevent it. Not by you, not by me, not by anyone else. Do you understand that? Yes, Poppet says. But what's the use in seeing the future if you can't do anything to stop it? You cannot stop things, Celia says. You can only be prepared for them to happen. You could stop them, Poppet mumbles, looking around at the multitude of books. Celia puts a finger under Poppet's chin and turns her head to look her in the eye. Only a handful of people on this train have any idea how integral I am to the running of this circus, she says. And as much as you two are amongst them, and you are both extremely clever, you do not comprehend the scope of what goes on here, and you wouldn't particularly like it if you did. Now, tell me what you sort of saw. Poppet closes her eyes, trying to concentrate. I don't know, she says. It was bright. Everything was on fire, and Bailey was there. You're going to have to do better than that, Celia says. I can't, Poppet says. I haven't seen anything clearly since before. And that's likely because you don't want to see anything clearly after that. And I can't say I blame you. But if you want me to do something to prevent whatever this is, I'm going to need more information. She unclasps the long silver chain that hangs around her neck, checking the time on the pocket watch that hangs from it before she holds it up in front of Poppet's eyes. Please, Poppet, Celia says. You don't need the stars for this. Just focus, even when you don't want to. Okay, so Celia takes the pocket watch and she's dangling it. Okay, so she is actually hypnotizing Poppet right now so that Poppet can communicate the rest of her vision. Poppet frowns, then turns her attention to the dangling silver watch as it sways in the warm light. Her eyes narrow, focusing on the reflections in the curve of the watch, and then they soften, looking at something beyond the watch, beyond the train. She starts to sway as her eyes flutter closed and she falls backward. Widget leaps forward to catch her before she hits the floor. Celia helps him move Poppet to one of the velvet benches by the table, while on a nearby shelf a cup of tea pours itself, steaming and brewing instantly in a flowered china cup. Poppet blinks, looking up at the chandeliers as though seeing them for the first time, before turning back to Celia to accept the cup of tea. That hurt, Poppet says. I'm sorry, dearest, Celia says. I think your sight is getting stronger, which makes it even more troublesome for you to be suppressing it. Poppet nods, rubbing her temples. Tell me everything you saw, Celia says. Everything. I don't care if it doesn't make any sense. Try to describe it. Poppet looks into her tea before she starts. There's a fire, she says. It starts with a bonfire, but bigger. And there's nothing containing it, like the whole courtyard is on fire. There's a loud noise and this heat, and Poppet pauses, closing her eyes as she attempts to concentrate on the images in her head. She opens her eyes and looks back at Celia. You're there. You're with someone else, and I think it's raining, and then you're not there anymore, but you still are. I can't explain it. And then Bailey is there, not during the fire, but after it, I think. What did this someone else look like? Celia asks. A man. He was tall, in a suit with a bowler hat, I think. It was hard to tell. Celia rests her head in her hands for a moment before she speaks. If that is who I think it is, I know for a fact he is in London at this moment. So perhaps this is not as immediate as you think. But it is, I'm sure of it, Poppet protests. Timing has never been your strong point. You said so yourself that this friend of yours is also present for this incident, and your first complaint was that he's not here. This might not happen for weeks or months yet, pet. Okay, so her vision is of the whole, almost like the whole circus, definitely the whole courtyard being on fire. She says she sees Celia there with someone else, a man in a bowler suit, which obviously Marco, right? She says that Bailey is there after the fire. Okay, and Celia, she's trying to listen, and she knows that Poppet does see things, but she thinks Poppet's timing must be off for a couple reasons. First reason, Bailey didn't make it onto the train, so he's not here. This can't be happening now because Bailey's not here. Second reason, Marco is supposed to be in London at this time. She says she knows for a fact. So if Marco's in London and not here, then this can't be something that's going to happen anytime soon. But we have to do something, Poppet says, slamming her teacup down on the table. The tea stops before it splashes open onto an open book, as though there is an invisible wall surrounding it. To be prepared, like you said. I will do what I can to prevent the circus from going up in smoke. I shall fireproof it as much as possible. Is that enough for now? After a moment, Poppet nods. Good, Celia says. We'll be off the train in a matter of hours. We can discuss this more later. Okay, so Celia says there's really not a whole lot I can do, but I will, she's going to fireproof all the tents of the circus so that if this really does happen, the tents won't burn up. Wait, Widget says. He's been sitting on the back of one of the velvet benches, staying out of the conversation. Now he turns to Celia. I have a question before you shoo us away. What is it? She asks. You said we don't comprehend the scope of what goes on here, he says. That was likely not the best choice of words. It's a game, isn't it? Widget asks. Celia looks at him, a slow, sad smile tugging at her lips. It took you 16 years to figure that one out, she says. I expected more from you, Widge. I'd guessed as much for a while, he says. It's not easy to see things you don't want me to know, but I've been picking up bits of it lately. You haven't been as guarded as usual. A game? Poppet asks, looking back and forth between her brother and Celia. Like a chess game, Widget says. The circus is the board. Not exactly, Celia says. It's not as straightforward as chess. We're all playing a game, Poppet says. Not us, Widget says. Her and someone else. The rest of us are, what, extra pieces? It's not like that, Celia says. Then what is it like? Widget asks. In response, Celia only looks at him, staring directly into his eyes without wavering. Widget returns her gaze silently for some time while Poppet watches them curiously. Eventually, Widget blinks, the surprise evident on his face. Then he looks down at his shoes. Celia sighs, and when she speaks, she addresses them both. What just happened? Widget is asking questions about how the game actually works, And Celia kind of tries to explain it, but she doesn't really have the words. And so instead, she looks at Widget and she just stares into his eyes. And we can tell that something's happening because Widget kind of like in surprise, you know. So basically, what has just happened is that Celia just let Widget read her, like read her for real and read the whole history of the game and everything, including the fact that she's in love with Marco and including the fact that one of them has to die. Okay, so all of a sudden, Widget gets it and he feels so bad for her. Celia sighs, and when she speaks, she addresses them both. If I have not been completely honest with you, it is only because I know a great deal of things that you do not want to know. I am going to ask that you trust me when I tell you I am trying to make things better. It is an extremely delicate balance, and there are a great many factors involved. The best we can do right now is take everything at it as it comes and not worry ourselves over things that have happened or things that are to come. Agreed? Widget nods, and Poppet reluctantly follows suit. Thank you, Celia says. Now, please go and try to get some rest. Poppet gives her an embrace before slipping out the door back into the hall. Widget lingers a moment. I'm sorry, he says. You have nothing to be sorry about, Celia tells him. I'm sorry anyway. He kisses her on the cheek before he leaves, not waiting for her to reply. What was that about? Poppet asks when Widget joins her in the hall. She let me read her, Widget says. All of her, without concealing anything. She's never done that before. He refuses to elaborate as they walk quietly back down the length of the train. What do you think we should do? Poppet asks once they have reached their car, a marmalade cat crawling onto her lap. I think we should wait, Widget says. I think that's all we can do right now. Alone in her book-filled chamber, Celia begins tearing her handkerchief into strips. One at a time, she drops each scrap of silk and lace into an empty teacup and lights it on fire. She repeats this process over and over, working until the cloth burns without charring, remaining bright and white within the flame. Okay, so that last little piece of that chapter is just her practicing how to fireproof all the material in the tent. I mean in the circus, so the tents won't burn. Okay, so we are pretty much poised right now for like the main climax of the book. We're gonna see what's up with the fire. We're gonna see what's gonna happen with Bailey. Is he gonna make it there? We're gonna see how Celia and Marco are gonna manage to make the circus self-sufficient. We just have so many things still left to find out about, and so it's all good from here. It's all exciting. It's all the chapters are chapters where we're going to find out big things. Okay, so like I said before, we're sharing this experience together and reading this book together as a class, and I am excited to finish it with you guys and see what's left. Okay, so have a good day.